And it's my pleasure to introduce our next demo artist, Marilyn Johansen. Marilyn teaches acrylic and watercolor painting in Fort Lauderdale. She brings her life experiences to her art, having lived from Belgium to Okinawa and places in between. Marilyn achieved a BA in education and was a classroom teacher for 10 years. She is second vice president of the Miami Watercolor Society and past president of the Florida Watercolor Society and the Gold Coast Watercolor Society. Her work has been accepted into many state, national, and international exhibitions. She has signature status membership with Gold Coast Watercolor Society, Miami Watercolor Society, the Palm Beach Watercolor Society, Florida Watercolor Society, Pennsylvania Watercolor Society, and the Southern Watercolor Society. Her painting, End of Day, is featured in North Light Books' Splash 20, Creative Composition. She has been published in local newspapers and in the Watercolor Artist magazine. Her paintings are found in private collections in the US, Canada, and Europe. Marilyn paints in series. Her various series includes birds, soldiers' stories, portraits of family and friends, Asian, and scenes that convey a moment in time. Her soldier stories series, that's a tongue twister, of paintings has been on a continuous traveling exhibition in South Florida since 2016, honoring our U.S. military. I'm pleased to present Marilyn Johansen doing her demo, Zoom into the Square Root of Your Painting. Marilyn?
Marilyn, you need to unmute.
Oh, all right. Hi, welcome. Welcome to my demo. I see we have a pretty good crowd here. Well, did it work? Am I unmuted?
You're good.
Okay, welcome to my demo. Zooming into the square root of your painting. So when somebody contacted me to do this, they noticed that a lot of my paintings, I use geometric shapes to get the viewer to look in a certain area. So I am going to show you today the wonderful world of shapes because I use squares, rectangles, ovals, rounds, diagonals, plus fun. When I taught school, I learned that the key to getting ideas across to my students was to make things memorable. And usually that was making things fun. So what I'm going to start with first is my trailer that was created to advertise the convention and my demo. So if we could play that now.
I'm Marilyn Johansen. And how do you get to the zooming into the square root of your painting, your composition? Let me tell you how I do it. I do it in a lot of my paintings. You'll see that. I take a piece of watercolor paper and I create an abstract with textures. I take photographs of wildflowers that I like. And I combine these to this work in progress. Wildflowers, squares, and emphasizing your composition, your painting. How are you going to make that viewer want to look at your painting? Join me, Florida Watercolor Society Convention 2021. See you there.
Well, here we are. All right, so I have two videos I want to share with you where I live. I live in Lauderdale by the sea, and I live on the ocean, and probably why I do a lot of birds. They're flying by. So I'm going to show two clips. One is from the frame and gallery store where I have a lot of paintings right here in Lauderdale by the sea. And another is from the Women's Center of Holy Cross Hospital. It's a separate the facility from the main hospital, and it has an art hall. So I'm going to show you those two. And I think, let's see, somebody is going to be playing those for us now.
Here we are, framing art by the sea, in Lauderdale by the sea. Let's go inside. I have many paintings here, and I'm going to point out some of the ones that I use zooming into the square root of your painting. Looking up here, this is called stepping out. Notice how I use the rectangle to get your attention. Moving over here, we have Blackbird, where I use the square around one bird to get your attention there. I have other paintings here. Giclées of paintings. Here we are at Holy Cross Women's Center, and there's a lovely exhibit here in which I have two paintings. This is by the board of the Gold Coast Watercolor Society. So here we go. This is my granddaughter and my grandmother. Notice in my grandmother's painting, I have used the square within a square to get your attention. In the painting of my granddaughter, I have used an unusual shape to create that.
All right, well, thanks. So we're going to go into my demo now. And we're going to talk about some of my paintings. We're going to go through some of the paintings of my work, and we're going to talk about what I've done to create an interest. So this first one you saw in the frame shop, and there was a couple of years ago, these blackbirds were fascinated with the palm trees on one of our main streets. And I was fascinated with them. And this went on for like a good month or so. And so I started taking pictures, and I did this painting, and I wanted to spotlight the birds, and I didn't think it was strong enough with just the birds. You can see the birds on the palm tree. But I did this one to really get you in. And then I think it leads you into the painting, and then you start to notice all the birds in the background. Thanks. Next. This is one of actually my two grandsons, and I repeated one grandson twice because I wanted three characters in the painting. It's a little busy, but that's actually created on purpose. Have you been with three kids like that? It's busy. They're running everywhere. They're looking at everything, and it's busy. And I wanted to create the feel of what it's like being with those kids. So it's a lot of color, but I use that rectangle and squares and all to really get across the feeling of children and play. And it's called Boys Play. Next. This is a painting. We have a museum here in Delray Beach called the Murakami, and it's in tribute to the Japanese colony that were here in the turn of the century. And the Murakami family ended up there, and they have a tribute to Japanese culture. And one of the holidays in Japan is Obon, which is somewhat like our Halloween. And they honor their ancestors, those that have gone before. I went there to the Obon festival, and I wanted a painting that experienced what I felt. So this is my feeling, and I've used circles and ovals and other shapes. And I took this photo of these two Japanese women dressed in kimono. Thanks. Next. This is a painting, again, inspired by the Murakami Museum. And I did a painting, a square, on hot press of koi. And if you look at the outer rim, the frame of this, you will see the koi painting. However, when I was finished with it, I wasn't impressed with it, and I just put it in the closet. later on, I went to another art show and I saw that a watercolor artist had used acrylic on top of watercolor. And I got home and I took that painting out and I looked through photos and I was inspired to do this. So I put this square on top of the watercolor painting, and the square is done with acrylic paint. And I actually cut a silhouette out. So actually the kimono, I didn't have to paint because it's the colors of the koi that I had originally put on. And then I added other things to decorate it with. Cute story, if you notice the small koi fish coming up down the side of the Japanese woman there. My granddaughter was little at the time and she's looking at it and she's looking at me and she's looking at the painting and she says, Mimi, you do know that fish go in the water, right? I guess she was afraid I was losing it. Next. This is a painting of, this is a very well-known jazz violinist here in the Fort Lauderdale area. And I used a lot of squares and the shape of a violin to create the background behind her. I photographed her at a jazz brunch one Sunday morning here in the Fort Lauderdale area. Next. This is a tribute. I have a whole series of soldier paintings, and this is one of them. And you can see that I use this very abstract method of painting these soldiers. And behind them are a lot of squares, rectangles, connecting all the soldiers in this painting. Thanks. Next. This is, again, the one you saw at the hospital. It's my granddaughter. She loved to blade with her rollerblades, and well, I guess it was skate with the rollerblades. And this was her, and I made up this background and kind of used that purple behind her. It's her favorite color, or was at the time. I think her colors have changed. Next. This is my grandmother. Strangely enough, she probably looks to you like a woman in her 30s. She was only 16 in this picture. This was 1913. She was 16 years old when she immigrated from Poland to the United States. She came by herself. She had some family over here, and she came by herself. And this is, I was taken in Poland before she came, I guess, you know, to honor the fact that she was leaving, and she never did return to Poland again. But that is her at 16 years old when she came to the United States. And again, I've used the background to get your attention. Of course, I used a lot of white on her face also to get your attention, but the background is geometric shapes. Next. This is a painting in tribute to my husband's service in Vietnam. And if you notice, I used that purple square right out of his chest, which kind of draws your attention into him. And he's basically on the side of the painting and coming into it. And it's painting with odd colors. That's on purpose. This was a difficult time in history, and I wanted to honor his service. Next. Again, my love of birds. So this is a white pelican that I photographed at Flamingo Gardens, and Flamingo Gardens has a bird sanctuary, and all the birds there are damaged, and they can't survive in the wild anymore. So this one was propped up, and he propped himself up on a crab cage. And then I used some of those shapes. And then I also wrote the story of going there that day and taking those photographs. But again, I used those rectangles behind him and then the shape of the crab cage as well that I repeated. Next. This is a painting I did of the same grandmother that you saw at 16. This is her on the left at 6. And this is her and her sister when her mother left them with their father in Poland, and the mother came to the United States. And you can see that very strong rectangle on the right is, and then below it is writing, and it's the story. And then that one sister that I've kind of grayed her face back because she never comes to the United States. and I never get to meet her. But my grandmother does come to the United States, and that's how I get to be here. Next. This is a painting of someone that I met. If some of you aren't familiar, I'm from a military family, growing up, moving all over from Brussels to Okinawa. This is Mrs. Chu. She was a very interesting woman, and I met her family when I lived in Okinawa. I went to high school with her daughter. This is her in her 40s. Mrs. Chu was born around the time Mao Zedong took over in China, or got going in China. And eventually, by the time she is old enough to marry, the Mao Zedong takes everything. She came from a very wealthy Chinese family, and he took everything from them. They would flee to Taiwan. Her husband would become a pilot, would work with my dad, and they would have a home in Taiwan and a small home in Okinawa. Nothing as grand as what her family had in China. But this is a tribute to her and her story. And you can notice again the geometry. I put the black, and everything is black and white because it's an interesting tale. And then she is in color, and then the rectangle behind her. Next. You saw these again in the Frame and Art store, but these are some Floccus Seagulls that I did. I had done this painting. It was commissioned several times, and it had more seagulls in it. And I cut some of the ones out, and then attempted to do this called stepping out, which some of these seagulls come forward, and some of them are just part of the group, and they're not going anywhere. They're kind of sticking with the group. And these three have reached out to come out and forward, stepping out. And I used that rectangle. Next. This is a photograph that I did on a trip to Chicago. And these were girls walking down the street. And of course, it was a street scene, but I didn't use the street scene. I took these rectangles and created them. And then I used part of the street scene, and I loved the tagging that was going on in the city, and I incorporated that into this composition. Again, you can see a lot of geometry to spotlight this painting. Next. This is the most obvious one. It's very obvious that I have used that rectangle behind that, the head of this beautiful pelican, and he's just standing, on the cement, just looking, and I named it Hump because he kind of turns and he's going hump. But again, this is a way to spotlight that face and get attention there. Next. All right, we're done. Now we're going to the demo. So this is something that I use to teach my students. And we're going to start with this first. Okay, so you see here, this is an abstract that I've created. And right now I'm going to tell you how to create it. So you take a piece of 140 or 300 paper, and you're going to use tape, masking tape. And are you going to put the spotlight on me? Okay, so you're going to take 140 watercolor paper or 300. And you're going to tape it down any size that you want. I would suggest you start, with a half a sheet or a quarter of a sheet. Tape it down. And then you're going to prepare 3 colors. And you start with 3 colors. And you can do 3 of any kind. I used in mine 3 of the primary colors. But you can use anything. And just, 2 colors that kind of go together, and then 1 that kind of stands out. And prepare these 3 colors, prepare your paper, prepare your texture making things. So texture making things are small dots, and which is bubble wrap, and large dots, which are big bubble wrap. And then this other is This is used under carpets. It's carpet skid, and you can get it at like a fabric store. And you cut it, you put it on your carpet so that this carpet doesn't slide, but it makes great grids for texture. And then you want to use saran wrap. So when I wet down with water the whole sheet of watercolor paper, the one that's taped down, then I don't cover the whole paper with the colors. I take the three prepared, heavy colors like the texture of cream, and just whip them onto playful and fun. Whip those three colors on. As soon as they're on, don't waste any time. Put these things on top of your paper and your paints that are already down. Put them on top. Put another board, and then weight it with some books that would like give you some weight, and you can use as many as you want to, or anything that would create weight, and leave it like that for 24 hours. Then you can take the spotlight off me and put it back onto that first demo. Remove spotlight. I better let them do it. We're going back to the photos. All right. So then when you take it off 24 hours later, this is what you have. And you can see that I took brush with the yellow and the blue, but the red I just spattered, and it makes it fun. And you're going to see how this evolves. So I'm taking shapes. So you see the square there with the ruler. So to begin with, let's just do all the same thing, and then you can start doing your own thing with this. I noticed some of this was used even in paintings that are in the show. So that are in the Florida Watercolor Society exhibit at Coral Springs Museum of Art. By the way, if you haven't gotten over there, I know they were showing the JPEGs, but if you can get to the show, it's absolutely beautiful. So, all right, so we have this here. So you take and you're going to make a mark. You're going to put a square in the middle of that abstract painting that we've created. Next one. So you can see here, let's see, can we get this bigger? So you can see the square. I put it in pencil, and I did it a little darker than I would suggest you do it. But I did it darker so that you could see. So there's a drawn square in the middle. Next one. Okay, and then around that square, I make a rectangle. And the rectangle is smaller on the sides than it is on and bigger on the top and bottom. So look carefully, and you can see the shapes that I've created. Now we're going to take tape again, and we're going to put it around the square. So next one, number 4, I think. Okay, and then you're going to take Mr. Clean Magic Eraser, original only, and you're going to wet it just like a sponge and squeeze it out. And you're just going to very carefully lighten the edges of that square. You don't take all the paint off the whole square, just the edges, because when you remove those edges and you remove the tape, you're going to see what happens. You create like almost like it lifts. It looks like it's lifted. Next one. I think I took several photos close and far away. Next one, to show you to do all the way around, just the edges. And then I take the tape off. Next one. Okay, so the tape is removed, and you can see that the square is lighter, and it looks like it lifts from the rest of the painting. Next one. And this next one. And then I have a sign here, and inside the square, you're going to keep those colors light, but the frame around it, which is the rectangle, you're going to paint darker. And that is going to give you, and then you're going to add different things to it. You're going to start playing with the fun. You're going to take the dots that you've created. You're going to take the grid that's created there. They're already there. You just have to emphasize them by painting in some of the areas. You don't have to come up with ideas. They're already there. And you can repeat some of these things. And that will make a very interesting effect. Now, I'm going to show you one that I did from beginning to end. Next. All right, so this one I did a little dark, and I wouldn't recommend doing it that dark because it made a lot of extra work for me. But again, the same primary colors. Next. And with this one, I drew the flowers on. And then I went and then I put next. You can see the picture of the flowers. And I had to use Mr. Clean and tape and an X-Acto knife. And when you tape around, and then you take the tape off the area, and then you lighten it with the magic eraser. And so I'm lightening all these petals for this daisy that I've created, that I've drawn. Keep next. Okay, so now I put the square around it. You can see the daisy is pretty much ready, and I'm going to lighten the edges of this square again with Mr. Clean Magic Eraser, because then this will start to come out. It looks like it raises from the painting. Next. All right, so the tape is off and you can see the lightened area. Next. All right, I wasn't happy with the white that I got, so I actually took gesso and painted those petals in the area. I didn't have to paint all of them, but in the area where it was very dark, I actually added some gesso to whiten that. You could use, gouache or whatever, but I chose to use gesso. Next. So I've got the square, I've got that first daisy, I've got two daisies below. And I start working with the darks in the rectangle around the square. And eventually, this is the final product. Next. Okay, so here it is. So I've actually created different, I finished the two daisies underneath. I use a lot of dark down there, and I use a cruciform shape and an arc, and I use the dots that were created with the texture. These are really fun to do. They're great, and they will help you develop that way of creating squares and rectangles. This is just one way of doing it. There is no limit to what you can do, and there's no limit to what subject matter you may want to do it with. So you can do all these paintings any way you want. And I hope that you'll have fun and that you got something out of this demo.
Thank you, Marilyn. I love the way that you incorporate the abstract with the realistic. I really like that look a lot, especially because I'm an abstract painter. So I really love that, and I like the way that you do that. We do have a few questions. We had several people enjoyed it. They enjoy your paintings. They love your paintings, and they're happy that you did this presentation today and were able to see all your work. Somebody also thought it was an interesting use of acrylic on top of watercolor. And how do you use the acrylic on top of the watercolor?
I mean, you just paint on top of it. And like I said, I wanted some of that watercolor to come through, especially all the time that I had put into those koi. And then I put the lady on top. But those were all things in the same theme, and I felt they went together. And I cut a silhouette out and put that there to hold that koi painting underneath it. And that would become her kimono. And then I just put tape, and then I just painted, and I painted that square in the middle of it. And I haven't done another one since like that, but I plan on doing it when the time comes. It usually comes to me.
But I think that was a great way to repurpose an old painting. I mean, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it did well. It did well for itself.
Somebody also said, is the use of a square or rectangle within your work, is that considered an illustration and not allowed in some shows? Have
No,
you encountered
no.
that?
No. And you'll see a lot, if you start, now that I've pointed it out, you'll see a lot of artists use that.
Mm.
A lot of different places.
Right. I have a question. The painting that has the seagulls in it stepping out,
Mhm.
I'm assuming that all that background texture was splattered on there.
No, it's a mouth atomizer.
Okay. And so how did you keep the seagulls that were actually stepping out without getting splattered all over the place?
Okay, so I took and actually went to create the rectangle. I just cut a rectangle out of paper.
Mhm.
And I put, little circles of tape to hold it down. And then I, the parts that were coming out, I taped and cut with an X-Acto knife.
Oh, wow.
The parts of the birds. And then I just blow that mouth atomizer. And sometimes I have to do it more than once. Because if you keep blowing while it's still wet, those tiny dots become bigger dots because they find each other. So you spray once, and then if it's not enough, then you let it dry. You blow it again, and then again. It's a fun way. I know there was another demo in which somebody showed how they used a mouth atomizer. I think it was yesterday.
Yeah.
So it's a fun thing to do. Keeps those lungs good.
I know, I've used them before. I about pass out trying to get the paint.
Any other questions?
Yes. Somebody wants to know, what do you use to do the writing on your paintings, and how do you actually apply that writing?
Okay, so I started school in Europe because we were stationed in Brussels, Belgium when I was starting first grade. And we had an inkwell with a pen that you dipped in the ink and you wrote with a blotter. So it is a pen that you put together, and then I just put water. I make any color watercolor paint I want, and I take a brush and I brush it onto the tip, like as if I were going into inkwell, and then I write.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and when I'm doing those paintings of the birds and I'm telling the story, now I get that idea from Asian painting, because when I lived in Okinawa, you see the Asian painting, it always has writing on it. That writing is the story of that painting. So I thought, if they can do it, why can't I?
Right. And when you're using acrylic paint, do you use tube acrylic or the fluid acrylic?
I've used both. But that painting that you saw with the Asian woman and the koi behind her, that was a full body acrylic.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I think that's about all of the questions that we have. I really enjoyed your demo. Thank you so much.
Thanks. I enjoyed doing it, and I enjoyed being asked.
Welcome.